He still had his fist in her hair when the door opened. He didn't turn around, didn't notice the man in black watching in silence until a calm voice asked, "Is this how you touch my sister?" And in that second, his power died. If this story pulled you in, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss what's ahead. I've got another unforgettable story coming tomorrow, and while you're here, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing people tuned in from all over the world. Okay, let's get back into it. 3 walls had already been punched through the apartment when Matteo Lambert, one of Southern Europe's most feared Mafia bosses, stepped through the door to find his sister's hair wrapped around her boyfriend's fist. Broken glass still glittered on the hardwood where the mirror had shattered. Someone was crying Juliet, her face contorted in pain and humiliation, hands clutching uselessly at her head, as if she could protect herself from what was already happening. The man restraining her stood frozen mid-justification, completely unaware of what was walking toward him through his own living room. Coffee Jones, 6'2", broad-shouldered, wearing a brown jacket over a burgundy hoodie, tightened his grip on the woman who'd spent 6 years hiding the most dangerous truth about herself. His other hand hovered near her face. Not striking yet, but the threat hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. The apartment felt smaller than it was. Beige walls, cream-colored furniture. Natural light streaming through sheer curtains that made everything look soft and safe, and utterly ordinary. It wasn't. Juliet's breath came in sharp, fractured gasps. Her blue denim jacket was twisted awkwardly around her torso from struggling. Strands of dark hair stuck to her tear-streaked face. She'd stopped trying to pull away, stopped trying to reason with him. Now she just endured, eyes squeezed shut, waiting for it to be over. Coffee's voice cut through the room like broken glass. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't see what you're doing?" His grip tightened. Juliet whimpered a sound so small it barely registered as human. "Answer me." She couldn't. Her throat had closed around the words, and that's when the door opened. Not violently, not dramatically, just opened. The man who stepped inside wore all black tailored slacks, a dark button-down shirt left open at the collar, a long black coat that moved like water when he walked. His hair was dark and precisely cut. His face was angular, unreadable, the kind of face that revealed nothing until it was too late. He didn't announce himself, didn't shout, didn't rush forward. He simply stood there, hand still on the doorknob, and took in the entire scene with the calm, clinical assessment of someone who'd walked into far worse and survived it. Coffee's head snapped toward the intruder. His expression shifted from rage to confusion to defensive aggression in the span of a heartbeat. "Who the hell are you? Get out of my... Is this how you touch my sister?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. Matteo's voice was quiet, almost conversational. But there was something underneath it, something cold and absolute, that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. Coffee blinked. "What?" "My sister." Matteo's eyes, dark, empty of warmth, slid from Coffee to Juliet and back again. "Is this how you touch her?" For a moment, nobody moved. Juliet's eyes opened, red-rimmed, horrified. She looked at her brother standing in the doorway like he was a ghost she'd spent years trying to outrun. "Matteo," she whispered. The word broke something in the air. Coffee's hand loosened just slightly on her hair. His brain was trying to process too many things at once. This stranger, this name, the way Juliet said it, like recognition, like history, like fear. "I don't know who you think you are," Coffee started, his voice hardening again. "But you need to leave. This is between me and her." Matteo tilted his head. Coffee Emmanuel Jones, born April 14th, 1992, in Accra. Moved to Geneva in 2019. Currently employed at Mercier Logistics as a warehouse supervisor. Address: this apartment. Lease signed 8 months ago. Joint account with Juliet Lambert opened 6 months ago. Withdrawal of €3,200 last Tuesday. Unauthorized. Coffee went very still. "You've been seeing Dr. Osei for anger management." Matteo continued, his tone unchanged. "Missed your last 4 appointments. Filed a police report in 2021 for assault. Charges dropped when the witness recanted. Should I continue?" The color drained from Coffee's face. Juliet felt his hand go slack in her hair. She pulled away carefully, stumbling back toward the couch, one hand braced against the armrest to keep herself upright. Her legs were shaking, her whole body was shaking. Matteo's gaze never left Coffee. "Let me be very clear about what's happening right now," Matteo said, stepping fully into the apartment, and closing the door behind him with a soft click. "You've just committed an act of violence against someone under my protection. That creates a problem." "I didn't." "She's not," Coffee stammered, his bravado crumbling like wet paper. "Look, man, I don't know what she told you, but she didn't tell me anything." Mateo's voice was surgical. "She never does. That's why I have people who watch, who report, who let me know when patterns change." Coffee's eyes darted to Juliet. She wouldn't look at him. Couldn't. "Juliet," Coffee tried, his voice shifting to something that might have been pleading. Tell him this is just a misunderstanding." She didn't speak. Mateo moved closer. Not quickly. Each step measured, deliberate. He stopped 3 feet away from Coffee, close enough to be a threat, far enough to look patient. "I'm going to give you one opportunity," Mateo said, "to explain to me why I shouldn't make you disappear." The words hung in the air like a noose. Coffee opened his mouth, closed it. His hands, those same hands that had been so sure of their power 60 seconds ago, trembled at his sides. From the corner of the room, Juliet watched her 2 worlds collide. The life she'd built, the life she'd abandoned, both converging in a moment she'd spent 6 years praying would never come. Mateo glanced at her, just once, just long enough to see the welts forming on her wrists, the red marks on her scalp, the way she held herself like something already broken. When he looked back at Coffee, his expression hadn't changed, but the room felt different, smaller, colder, final. "Please," Coffee whispered. Mateo reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed. The call connected on the first ring. "I need a cleanup team," Mateo said quietly. "Residential. 1 removal. No complications." He ended the call, and then he waited. Juliet was 9 years old the first time she saw her brother kill someone. Not with his hands, not with a gun, just with a phone call. The same kind of phone call he'd just made 60 seconds ago in her apartment while Coffee stood there, trembling. She'd been hiding behind the door of Mateo's study in their childhood home, a sprawling villa outside Lyon that smelled like old wood and expensive cigars. She wasn't supposed to be there, wasn't supposed to see. But children have a way of witnessing the things adults work hardest to hide. Mateo had been 23 then, already running parts of their father's operation, already feared. The man kneeling in front of him had been crying, begging, making promises he'd never have the chance to keep. Mateo listened to all of it with the same expression he wore, now patient, empty, final. Then he made a call. Then the man was gone. Juliet never asked what happened. She already knew. You didn't beg Mateo Lambert for mercy and walk away to tell the story. That night, she'd crawled into bed and decided something that would shape the next 17 years of her life. She would never become someone who needed that kind of protection. She would never be the reason someone knelt and begged. She would disappear. It took her until she was 18 to actually do it. Their father had died when she was 15, a heart attack, they said, though Juliet suspected Mateo's enemies had more creative methods than most people assumed. After the funeral, Mateo became something more than her brother. He became a wall between her and a world that wanted to devour anything connected to the Lambert name. He hired bodyguards she never saw but always felt. He vetted her friends, her teachers, her routes to school. He controlled everything, because control was the only language he understood, and Juliet suffocated under it. She didn't hate him. That was the terrible part. She loved him. Loved the brother who used to read her bedtime stories before the empire swallowed him whole. Loved the man who still remembered her birthday even when he was negotiating deals that moved millions across borders. But love and freedom were not the same thing. So on a Tuesday morning in March, 3 weeks after her 18th birthday, Juliet Lambert walked out of the villa with a single backpack, a fake passport, and 30,000 euros she'd been saving since she was 14. She left no note, no goodbye, just absence. She knew Mateo would look for her, knew he had the resources to find her if he truly wanted to, but she also knew her brother well enough to understand this. If she ran far enough, quietly enough, if she became nobody in a world that only noticed power, he might let her go. Not because he didn't care, because he cared too much. For 6 years, Juliet built a life out of invisibility. She moved through Europe like a ghost. Vienna, Prague, Amsterdam, finally Geneva. She used different names, worked cash jobs, rented apartments through third parties, avoided cameras, avoided questions, avoided anything that might send up a flag in whatever systems Mateo was monitoring. She became a waitress, a bookstore clerk, a dog walker, normal jobs, forgettable jobs. Jobs where nobody asked about your last name or why you paid rent 3 months in advance. She made exactly one friend, a woman named Claire, who worked at the same cafe and never asked about Juliet's past because she was too busy complaining about her own. It was the loneliest kind of freedom. Some nights, Juliet would lie awake in cheap apartments and wonder if Matteo knew where she was. If he was watching from a distance, letting her play at independence, while keeping her safe from threats she'd never see coming. Other nights, she convinced herself he'd moved on, built his empire higher, forgotten the little sister who chose ordinary over blood. Both possibilities hurt equally. She met Coffee on a Sunday in October. He'd smiled at her in a bookstore, easy, confident, warm, in a way that made her feel seen after years of practicing invisibility. They talked about novels neither of them had read. He made her laugh, asked for her number without pressure. Their first date was coffee that turned into dinner, that turned into walking through Geneva until the streetlights came on. He was charming, attentive. He asked questions about her day and actually listened to the answers. He didn't push when she was vague about her past, didn't demand explanations for why she never posted photos online or why she always paid in cash. For 3 months, it was perfect. For 3 months, Juliet let herself believe she could have this something normal, something hers, something untouched by violence. Then the questions started. Small ones at first. Why don't you ever talk about your family? Where did you say you grew up? Why do you flinch when I raise my voice? Then the comments. You're too friendly with that guy at work. Why do you need your own bank account? I'm just trying to protect you. Then the control. He needed to know where she was, who she was with, why she was late, why she smiled at the barista, why she didn't answer his texts within 5 minutes. The first time he grabbed her wrist, he apologized immediately. Bought her flowers, promised it would never happen again. It happened again. And again, each time followed by apologies, by justifications, by promises that if she just stopped making him so worried, so jealous, so angry, it would stop. Juliet knew what this was. She'd been trained by bodyguards. She'd grown up around men who understood violence as a language. She knew the patterns, knew the escalation, knew exactly where this was headed. But leaving meant answering questions, filing reports, attracting attention. Leaving meant becoming visible, and visibility was the one thing Juliet Lambert could never afford. So she stayed. She made herself smaller, quieter, more careful. She stopped seeing Claire, stopped going to her favorite cafe, stopped doing anything that might trigger Coffee's rage. She survived, until tonight, until Matteo walked through the door and saw what surviving had cost her. Now, standing in her own apartment, while her brother made the kind of phone call that erased people from existence, Juliet felt the weight of 6 years collapse into a single, terrible truth. You could run from blood, but blood always remembered where to find you. Coffee Jones learned early that charm could get you anything violence couldn't. His father taught him that not through words, but through absence. The kind of absence that came from being locked up for putting hands on the wrong person at the wrong time. Coffee was 12 when the prison sentence started. 16 when his father finally got out, older and angrier, and determined to teach his son the lesson he'd learned too late. Never let them see you lose control. Control was currency. Control was power. And Coffee had spent his entire adult life perfecting the art of looking like the kind of man who never needed to raise his voice because everyone already wanted to please him. It worked beautifully, until he met someone who didn't need anything from him. Juliet had been different from the beginning. Most women Coffee dated were easy to read. They wanted something. Security, attention, status, escape from whatever chaos filled their lives. He could spot the hunger in their eyes within the first conversation and calibrate his approach accordingly. But Juliet looked at him like she was deciding whether he was safe enough to stand near. That first day in the bookstore, he'd approached her with his standard opening casual confidence, self-deprecating humor, just enough interest to seem genuine without being desperate. She'd smiled politely, answered his questions with the bare minimum, started to walk away. He should have let her go. Instead, he'd pivoted, dropped the performance, asked a genuine question about the book, in her hand some French novel he'd actually read in school. Her whole demeanor shifted. She stopped moving, started talking, actually looked at him. And Coffee felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like he'd won something worth winning. The first 3 months were the best of his life. Juliet was quiet, thoughtful, careful in ways that made every smile feel earned, She didn't demand expensive dinners or weekend trips. She was happy with walks and coffee and conversations that lasted until the streetlights came on. She never asked about his job, his money, his plans. She never scrolled through his phone or questioned where he'd been. She never needed him, and that was the problem. Coffee had built his entire sense of self around being needed, around being the solution to someone else's problem, the protector, the provider, the man who stepped in and fixed things. But Juliet didn't need fixing. She had her own apartment, her own job, her own carefully constructed life that existed completely independently of him. She'd smile and kiss him goodbye and disappear into that life without a single backward glance. It made him feel invisible, unnecessary, irrelevant. And Coffee Jones could not tolerate being irrelevant. The shift started so slowly he didn't even notice it happening. A comment here, a question there. Who were you talking to? Why do you need to work late? That guy at the coffee shop was looking at you weird. Juliet would laugh it off. Tell him he was imagining things. Kiss him and change the subject. But Coffee wasn't imagining things. He saw how men looked at her quiet, pretty, self-contained. He saw how she moved through the world like she didn't need anyone's permission or protection. He saw the distance in her eyes sometimes, like she was remembering something he wasn't allowed to know about. She had secrets, and secrets meant she didn't trust him. And if she didn't trust him, what was the point of any of this? The questions became more frequent, more pointed. He needed to know where she was, who she was with, why she hadn't texted back immediately. Not because he didn't trust her, he'd tell himself, but because he cared. Because caring meant paying attention. Because how could he protect her if he didn't know what she was doing? Juliet started answering faster, started volunteering information before he asked, started coming home earlier, smiling wider, trying harder to prove something she shouldn't have needed to prove. And Coffee felt himself relax. This was better. This was right. This was how relationships were supposed to work. He didn't remember the first time he grabbed her. That was the worst part. Looking back now, standing in this apartment with a stranger on the phone arranging his disappearance, Coffee couldn't pinpoint the exact moment when his hands became weapons instead of comfort. It had been an argument. Something stupid. She'd contradicted him in front of Claire, her only friend, and he'd felt that familiar flash of humiliation rise up his throat like acid. Later, in the apartment, he'd asked why she'd done that, why she'd made him look stupid, why she couldn't just support him. She'd tried to explain, tried to tell him it wasn't like that. He'd grabbed her wrist, not hard, just firm enough to make her stop talking, stop explaining, stop making excuses. I need you to listen to me, he'd said, and she had. She'd gone very quiet and very still and listened. And Coffee had felt something ugly and satisfying bloom in his chest. Power. Not the earned kind. Not the kind that came from being better or smarter or more capable. The kind that came from making someone afraid. After that, it was easier. When she stayed out too long, he could grab her arm and pull her close, and feel her heartbeat spike with fear disguised as apology. When she questioned him, he could raise his voice and watch her flinch and know she'd back down. When she made him feel small, he could make her feel smaller. And every time, he told himself it was her fault. That if she just listened, just respected him, just stopped making him so angry he wouldn't have to do this. He apologized, of course, bought flowers, made promises, held her gently, and whispered that he loved her, and this would never happen again, until it did, again, and again. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Coffee knew he was becoming his father. Knew he was following the same script that ended in prison cells and broken families and children who grew up afraid of their own anger. But knowing and stopping were not the same thing. Tonight had been different. Tonight she'd come home late. No explanation, no text. Just walked in like she had the right to disappear without permission. And something in Coffee had snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just snapped. He'd cornered her, demanded answers, grabbed her hair when she tried to turn away. He was going to make her understand. Going to make her see what she was doing to him. The door had opened, and now Coffee stood frozen in his own apartment, watching a man in black make a phone call that would erase him, and finally understood the truth his father learned too late. Control was never real. It was always just borrowed time before someone stronger took it away. Matteo Lambert had learned to read patterns the way other people read books. A missed phone call, a delayed email response, a purchase made at an unusual time in an unusual place. Most people saw random data. Matteo saw stories written in digital fingerprints, Stories that told him everything he needed to know about whether someone was lying, hiding, or about to become a problem. It was a skill that kept him alive in a world where trust was a luxury and mistakes were fatal. It was also the skill that had been tracking his sister for 6 years. Not closely, not invasively. He'd promised himself that much. Juliet wanted freedom, wanted distance, wanted a life that didn't smell like gun oil and blood money. He understood that, respected it even. But understanding didn't mean abandoning, so Mateo had built a system quiet, passive, nearly invisible. Financial monitoring on accounts she thought were anonymous. Facial recognition alerts in cities where she might surface. Keywords flagged in databases across a dozen countries. He never intervened, never made contact, never let her know he was watching. He just watched. And for 6 years, the data told him a consistent story. Juliet was surviving, working, moving, staying invisible, staying safe, until 3 months ago. The first anomaly had been small. A joint bank account opened in Geneva. Unusual, but not alarming. Juliet was entitled to relationships, entitled to trust someone enough to share finances. Mateo noted it. Ran a background check on Coffee Emmanuel Jones. Found nothing immediately disqualifying. No criminal record beyond a single assault charge that had been dropped. Standard employment history. No flags in any intelligence databases. He filed it away and continued monitoring. The second anomaly came 5 weeks later. Juliet's spending patterns changed. She stopped going to her favorite bookstore, stopped meeting her friend Claire for coffee on Thursdays. Her grocery purchases shrank, fewer ingredients, more prepared meals, the kind of shift that suggested someone eating alone, even when they weren't living alone. Still not definitive. Relationships changed routines. That was normal. But Mateo had learned long ago that normal and safe were not synonyms. The third anomaly made him start packing. Unauthorized withdrawal from the joint account. 3,200 euros. Juliet's salary couldn't absorb that kind of loss. She'd had to pull from her emergency fund, the one she'd been building since she was 14, the one she protected like a lifeline. Someone was taking from her, and she was letting them. Mateo sat in his office in Marseille, a converted industrial space overlooking the harbor, all glass and steel and strategic sightlines, and stared at the data streams flowing across 3 monitors. His second in command, a sharp-eyed woman named Inez, stood in the doorway. "You're going to Geneva," she said. "Not a question. Tomorrow." Mateo didn't look away from the screens. "I need you to run the Italian shipment while I'm gone. How long? However long it takes." Inez moved closer, arms crossed. She'd worked for Mateo for 7 years, knew him well enough to read the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when he was trying to stay rational about something deeply personal. "What did you find?" she asked quietly. Mateo pulled up a financial graph, showed her the withdrawal patterns, the spending changes, the geographic data that showed Juliet's movements becoming smaller, more constrained, more predictable. "Someone's isolating her," he said. "Could be normal relationship stuff." "Could be." Mateo closed the laptop. "But Juliet doesn't do normal. She does careful. She does controlled. She doesn't let people close enough to change her patterns this dramatically unless something's wrong." Inez studied him for a long moment. "You haven't seen her in 6 years. I know. She ran from you. From this life. I know. Going there might push her further away." Mateo stood, buttoning his suit jacket with the precise, economical movements of someone who'd learned to control every gesture. "If I'm wrong, she can tell me to leave. If I'm right." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Mateo arrived in Geneva on a Wednesday. He didn't go to Juliet's apartment immediately. That would be crossing a line he wasn't ready to cross yet, the line between protective surveillance and active interference. Instead, he watched. He sat in cafes across from her workplace and observed her arriving 15 minutes early, leaving exactly on time, never stopping to talk to coworkers. He followed her to the grocery store and watched her buy enough food for one person, even though she supposedly lived with someone. He noted the way she kept her head down, the way she moved through crowds like she was trying not to be noticed, the way she checked her phone obsessively, responding to messages within seconds like she was afraid of what would happen if she didn't. None of it was proof. All of it was pattern. And Mateo had built an empire on trusting patterns. On the 3rd day, he saw Coffee. The man was waiting outside Juliet's work when her shift ended. Tall, confident posture, dressed casually in a brown jacket and burgundy hoodie. He smiled when Juliet approached, but it didn't reach his eyes. Mateo watched from across the street as they talked. Watched Coffee's hand settle on Juliet's lower back, possessive, controlling. Watched Juliet's shoulders curve inward slightly, making herself smaller. Watched Coffee lean in and say something that made Juliet nod quickly, agreeing to something she clearly didn't want to agree to. It was a 30-second interaction. It told Mateo everything. He'd planned to wait, to gather more information, to approach Juliet carefully, privately, give her space to explain or deny, or tell him to go to hell if that's what she needed. But that night, sitting in a hotel room across the city, Mateo received an alert. Emergency flagged keyword, domestic disturbance, raised voices, neighbors reporting sounds of a struggle. Address, Juliet's apartment. He was in his car before the second alert came through. He was breaking traffic laws before the third. And by the time he reached the building, took the stairs 2 at a time, he heard the muffled sounds of crying and shouting through the door. By the time he pushed that door open and saw his sister on her knees, with another man's hand tangled in her hair, Mateo wasn't thinking about patterns anymore. He wasn't thinking about strategy or consequences or the promise he'd made to let Juliet live her own life. He was thinking about the 9-year-old girl who used to hide behind his office door, the 18-year-old who ran because she loved him too much to watch what he was becoming, the sister he'd failed to protect by giving her exactly what she asked for: distance, freedom, the illusion that she could ever be safe without him. He'd been wrong, and Coffee Jones was about to pay the price for that mistake. The argument started over nothing. That was always how it started. Something small, something that shouldn't matter, something that in a healthy relationship would be a conversation, maybe a minor disagreement, and then forgotten by morning. But Coffee and Juliet hadn't had a healthy relationship in months. She'd been late coming home from work, 23 minutes late. Traffic had been worse than usual, a tram delay, the kind of thing that happened in any city on any Wednesday evening. She'd texted him, explained, apologized even though she had nothing to apologize for. It hadn't been enough. Coffee was waiting by the door when she walked in, arms crossed, face set in that expression she'd learned to recognize, the one that meant he'd been building a case against her in his mind for the past half hour, collecting evidence for crimes she didn't know she'd committed. 23 minutes, he said. No hello, no how was your day, just accusation. I texted you, Juliet said quietly, setting her bag down carefully. Everything had to be careful now. Every movement measured to avoid triggering whatever storm was already forming. The tram was delayed. There was an accident on. You could have called. I was on the tram. I didn't want to disturb the other. You didn't want to talk to me. Kofi moved closer. That's what you mean. You didn't want to hear my voice. You wanted to stay out there, doing whatever you were actually doing, without me checking on you. Juliet's chest tightened. This script was familiar. She knew all the lines, all the beats, all the ways it would escalate no matter what she said. I wasn't doing anything, she said. I was working. Then I came straight home, like always. Like always? Coffee laughed sharp, bitter. You've been different lately. Distant, like you're hiding something. I'm not. Who is he? The question landed like a slap. Juliet stared at him. What? You heard me. Coffee was close enough now that she could smell the coffee on his breath, see the vein pulsing in his temple. Who is he? There's no one, Coffee. There's never been anyone but... Don't lie to me. His voice cracked across the apartment like a whip. I see the way you look at your phone, the way you smile at messages you think I don't notice, the way you turn away when I try to touch you. Because you grab me, Juliet said before she could stop herself. Because you hurt me. The silence that followed was deafening. Coffee's expression shifted through a dozen emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, denial, rage, justification. He settled on indignation. I hurt you? His voice dropped dangerously low. I protect you. I care about you. I try to build a life with you, and this is what I get? Accusations? Disrespect? I didn't mean... You never mean anything. Coffee grabbed her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise. Not yet. Just hard enough to make a point. You just say whatever you think will make me the bad guy. Juliet tried to pull away. His grip tightened. Let go. Not until you tell me the truth. I am telling you the truth. Her voice was shaking now, fear and frustration bleeding together. There's no one else. There's nothing to tell. Please just... Please what? Coffee jerked her closer. Please believe your lies? Please ignore that you're turning into someone I don't even recognize? You're the one who changed. The words burst out before Juliet could swallow them back. You used to be kind. You used to listen. Now you just... His other hand shot out and grabbed her hair. Not gently. Not accidentally. Deliberately. Juliet cried out pain and shock, and the terrible realization that this was worse than before. This was different. This was the moment she'd been dreading since the first time his hand had curled into a fist. This was the line being crossed. Don't you dare blame me for what you made me become, Coffee hissed. His face was inches from hers, twisted with rage that had been building for weeks, months, maybe his entire life. You did this. Your secrets, your distance, your refusal to just be honest with me. Juliet's hands came up instinctively, trying to pry his fingers from her hair, trying to protect herself, trying to breathe through the pain radiating across her scalp. Coffee, please. Please what? Please stop caring? Please stop trying? Please just let you do whatever you want without consequences? He yanked harder. Juliet stumbled, her knees hitting the hardwood floor. The impact sent shockwaves up her legs. Tears spilled hot and fast down her cheeks. This was it. This was the moment her life had been building toward since the day she ran from Mateo. She'd thought she could escape violence by choosing ordinary, thought she could outrun her past by building a future with someone who had nothing to do with the criminal world. She'd been wrong. Violence didn't need a criminal empire to flourish. It grew just fine in ordinary apartments with ordinary men, who learned that power felt good when you had none anywhere else. Answer me. Coffee's voice was breaking now, rage and desperation mixing into something unrecognizable. Tell me what you're hiding. Nothing, Juliet sobbed. I'm not hiding anything. But she was. She'd been hiding for 6 years. Hiding her name, her history, her brother, her past. Not because she didn't trust Coffee, though she'd been right not to, but because invisibility was survival. And now that invisibility was shattering. You're lying. Coffee's other hand rose not a fist, but a threat. You've always been lying. Juliet squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for impact, waiting for the final escalation, waiting for the moment when bruises became breaks, and anger became something irreversible. The impact never came. Instead, she heard something else. A door opening. Footsteps. Calm, measured, unhurried, and then a voice cold, familiar, impossible, that made her entire world stop. Is this how you touch my sister? Juliet's eyes flew open. And there, standing in the doorway like a ghost made flesh, was Mateo Lambert, her brother, her past, her reckoning. The man she'd spent 6 years running from had just walked into the moment she'd spent 6 months trying to survive. And Coffee, still gripping her hair, still frozen in his rage, had absolutely no idea what was about to happen to him. For exactly 3 seconds, nobody moved. Coffee's hand stayed tangled in Juliet's hair. Her knees remained pressed against the hardwood floor. Mateo stood in the doorway, one hand still on the knob, his expression as calm as someone who just walked into a library instead of an active assault. Then Coffee's brain caught up to the situation. He let go of Juliet not gently, just releasing her like she'd suddenly become irrelevant, and straightened to his full height. 6'2", broad shoulders, the physical advantages he'd been using to intimidate Juliet for months. Against Mateo, they meant nothing. Who the hell are you? Coffee's voice tried for authority but landed somewhere closer to confusion. You can't just walk into your apartment? Mateo closed the door behind him with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. Interesting. The lease says Juliet Lambert. Joint tenancy, yes, but her name is first, so technically I'm walking into my sister's apartment. The word hung in the air. Sister. Coffee's eyes flicked to Juliet, still on the floor, one hand pressed to her scalp where the pain was radiating in hot pulses. She wouldn't look at him, wouldn't look at Mateo either, just stared at the floor like if she stayed still enough, this moment might rewind itself. Your sister, Coffee repeated slowly. His tone suggested he was trying to process whether this was a threat or just an inconvenience. Look, man, I don't know what she told you, but this is between me and her. It's a private matter. Mateo tilted his head slightly. The gesture was almost curious, almost polite. Private, he said. Is that what you call it when you put your hands on a woman half your size and make her beg? I didn't. She wasn't. Coffee's face flushed. You don't understand. She's been lying to me, keeping secrets. I was just trying to get her to be honest. By grabbing her hair. I lost my temper. It happens. Couples fight. It's normal. Normal. Mateo took a step forward. Just one. But something about the movement made the entire room feel smaller. Coffee Emmanuel Jones, born April 14th, 1992, in Accra. You moved to Geneva 3 years ago, after your previous girlfriend filed a restraining order in London. That charge was dropped when she left the country. Should I continue? The color drained from Coffee's face. Juliet looked up. Her brother's voice was conversational, almost pleasant, but she recognized the tone. She'd heard it before. In that study when she was 9 years old. Right before men disappeared. How do you? Coffee started. Your current employer is Mercier Logistics, Matteo continued as if Coffee hadn't spoken. You make €4,200 per month. Your credit score is 680. You have €14,000 in debt spread across 3 cards. You withdrew $3,200 from Juliet's joint account last Tuesday, without her permission. You've missed 4 anger management appointments with Dr. Osei. You have a police record in Ghana domestic disturbance, 2018. Charges dropped when the witness recanted her statement 3 days after someone matching your description was seen outside her workplace. Each fact landed like a physical blow. Coffee's mouth opened and closed. His hands, those same hands that had been so sure of their power minutes ago, trembled at his sides. I know your employment history, Matteo said. Your medical records, your search history, the license plate of the car you borrowed last weekend, the bar you went to Tuesday night when you told Juliet you were working late. I know where your mother lives, where your sister works, where your nephew goes to school. Stop? The word came out as barely a whisper. Matteo stopped walking. He was less than 6 feet away now. Close enough that Coffee could see the absolute absence of emotion in his eyes. I know everything about you, Coffee, Matteo said quietly. Every secret you've ever kept, every lie you've ever told, every corner you've ever cut. I know you better than you know yourself. Do you know why? Coffee couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Because people like you are my business. Matteo continued. Men who think power comes from making others afraid, who mistake control for strength, who put their hands on people who can't fight back and call it love. From the floor, Juliet finally found her voice. Matteo. It came out broken, shaking. A plea wrapped in a name. Please. The effect was immediate. Matteo's gaze shifted to his sister, really looked at her for the first time since entering the apartment. Took in the tear-streaked face, the red welts forming on her scalp. The way she held herself like something already shattered. His expression didn't change. But the air around him did. It went from cold to arctic. When he looked back at Coffee, something fundamental had shifted. You made a mistake tonight, Matteo said. His voice was surgical now. Precise. A very specific mistake. You put your hands on someone under my protection. That creates a problem. I didn't know, Coffee stammered. She never said I didn't know who you were. No, Matteo agreed. You didn't, because Juliet ran from my world 6 years ago. She changed her life, her routines, everything about herself to build something ordinary, something safe, something that had nothing to do with blood and violence. He paused, and somehow, she still ended up on her knees in front of a man who thinks hurting her makes him powerful. The words hit Coffee like a physical force. He took a step back. Then another. I'm sorry, he said. The apology came out desperate now. I'm sorry. I lost control. It won't happen again. I swear it won't. You're right, Matteo said. It won't. He pulled out his phone. Coffee watched the movement like a mouse watching a snake. Matteo dialed. The call connected on the first ring. I need a cleanup team, he said calmly. Residential, 1 removal, no complications. Wait, Coffee's voice cracked. Wait, please, I'm sorry. I'll leave. I'll go right now. I'll never contact her again. Please. Matteo ended the call, slipped the phone back into his pocket. When he spoke again, his voice was almost gentle. You should have thought about that before you grabbed her hair. Coffee's legs gave out. He didn't fall, just sagged against the wall, all the fight draining out of him like water from a broken glass. And Juliet, still on the floor, watched her 2 worlds collide with the terrible certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The cleanup team arrived in exactly 11 minutes. No sirens, no flashing lights, just 2 black SUVs that pulled up to the curb with the understated efficiency of people who'd done this hundreds of times before. Coffee heard the vehicles before he saw them. His head snapped toward the window. eyes wide with the kind of animal panic that came from finally understanding there was no escape. "Please," he whispered again. The word had lost all meaning through repetition. "Please, I'll do anything. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. I'll leave the country. You'll do exactly what you're told," Matteo said calmly. "Starting now." The apartment door opened. 2 men entered, both wearing dark suits, both moving with the practiced silence of professionals. One was older, maybe 50, with gray threading through his dark hair. The other was younger, built like a boxer, with scars along his knuckles that told their own story. Neither looked at Juliet. Neither needed to be told what to do. The older man nodded once at Matteo. "Sir, take him," Matteo said. Quietly. "No scene. The neighbors have already heard enough tonight." "Understood." Coffee pushed himself off the wall, hands raised like he was being arrested. "Where are you taking me? What are you going to—" "That depends entirely on you," Matteo interrupted. He moved to stand between Coffee and Juliet, not protectively, just conclusively, like he was closing a door on a chapter that was already finished. "You're going to leave this apartment. You're going to leave this city. You're going to disappear so completely that Juliet Lambert becomes a name you can't even remember." "Okay, yes, I can do that." The words tumbled out desperately. "I'll go tonight. Right now. I'll pack and—" "You're not packing anything," the younger man said. His voice was flat, bored almost. "You're leaving with what you're wearing. Everything else stays." Coffee's face went white. "My clothes, my papers, my clothes." "Will be dealt with," Matteo said. "You'll receive your documents and enough money to start over somewhere far from here. In exchange, you'll sign papers that transfer any claim on this apartment, the joint account, and anything else connecting you to Juliet. You'll never contact her again, never speak her name, never even think about coming back. And if I don't?" The question was asked quietly, almost hypothetically. Matteo's expression didn't change. "Then we moved to less pleasant solutions." The weight of those words settled over the room like snow, cold, silent, absolute. Coffee looked at the 2 men flanking him. Looked at Matteo standing there with his hands in his pockets like they were discussing the weather. Looked at Juliet still on the floor, finally watching now, her face unreadable. "This isn't legal," Coffee said weakly. "You can't just—" "Legal." Matteo's smile was thin, humorless. "You grabbed my sister by the hair in her own home and made her beg for mercy. You stole from her, isolated her, spent months systematically destroying her sense of safety. And you want to talk to me about legal?" He took a step closer. "Here's what's legal, Coffee. Legal is Juliet going to the police, filing a report, showing them the bruises on her wrists, the welts on her scalp, testifying about months of abuse. Legal is you going to prison for assault, theft, harassment. Legal is your name in the papers, your family finding out what kind of man you are, your future employers seeing your record." Matteo paused. "What I'm offering you is better than legal. I'm offering you invisibility, a chance to disappear before consequences catch up. Most men don't get that option." Coffee's jaw worked. His eyes darted between the men, the door, Juliet looking for any exit, any argument, any way out that didn't involve complete surrender. There wasn't one. "Okay," he said finally. The word came out broken, defeated. "Okay, I'll go. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't hurt me." "That depends on you," Matteo repeated. "My men will take you somewhere secure. You'll sign documents. You'll provide information we need to ensure you stay gone. If you cooperate, you'll walk away with enough money to start over, and a lesson about what happens when you touch the wrong person." "And if I don't cooperate?" Matteo's eyes went dead. "Then you become a cautionary tale." The older man moved forward, one hand settling on Coffee's shoulder, not violent, just firm, guiding. "Let's go." Coffee let himself be led toward the door. He moved like a sleepwalker. All the fight drained out of him, replaced by numb compliance. At the threshold he stopped, turned back one last time. "Juliet." "Don't." Matteo's voice cut through whatever apology or justification Coffee had been preparing. "Don't say her name. Don't look at her. Don't even think about her. You lost that right the moment you decided violence was love." Coffee's mouth closed, his shoulders sagged, and then he was gone. The door clicked shut. The sound of footsteps faded down the hallway. The building returned to silence. For a long moment, neither Matteo nor Juliet moved. The apartment felt enormous, suddenly. Empty in a way that had nothing to do with Coffee's absence and everything to do with the weight of what had just happened. Finally, Matteo crossed the room. He didn't rush, didn't make a show of concern, just moved with quiet purpose until he was kneeling in front of his sister, eye level, not boss to subordinate, not protector to victim, brother to sister. "Juliet," he said softly. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in 6 years. He was older, harder around the edges. The boy who used to read her bedtime stories was gone completely, replaced by something colder and more efficient, but his eyes were the same. And when he lifted one hand slowly, carefully, asking permission before touching her, she saw the ghost of the brother she'd run from, the brother she'd never stopped loving, the brother she'd never been able to escape. "I'm sorry," Matteo said. 2 words, quiet, honest. "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner." Juliet's face crumpled. 6 years of running, 6 months of surviving, 6 minutes of watching her past collide with her present, all of it crashed down at once. She collapsed forward into her brother's arms and finally let herself break. And Matteo, who'd built an empire on never showing weakness, never admitting fault, never letting anyone close enough to hurt him, held his sister and promised himself that no one would ever make her feel this small again. No matter what it cost, no matter who had to disappear, no one. The room Coffee was taken to wasn't what he expected. No basement, no chains, no medieval torture chamber from the movies he'd watched where mobsters broke fingers and extracted confessions. Just an office. Clean, modern, minimalist in a way that suggested expensive taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Geneva's city lights. A mahogany desk, leather chairs, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than Coffee made in a year. It looked like a place where business happened, and that, somehow, was more terrifying than any dungeon could have been. The 2 men who'd escorted him, the older one with gray hair, the younger one with scarred knuckles, positioned him in a chair facing the desk. Not roughly. They didn't need to be rough. Coffee's legs had already given up any thought of running. "Wait here," the older man said. They left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded exactly like the one in Juliet's apartment. The one that had sealed his fate. Coffee sat alone in the chair and tried to breathe. His hands were shaking. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape his body. Every story he'd ever heard about organized crime flooded his mind. Disappearances, concrete boots, bodies that never surfaced. Was this how it ended? Not in a dramatic confrontation, but in a clean office with expensive art and a view of the city he'd never see again. The door opened. Matteo walked in. He'd removed his coat, rolled up his sleeves. The movement revealed forearms marked with ink, intricate designs that looked less like decoration and more like a language Coffee couldn't read. He sat behind the desk, didn't speak immediately, just opened a laptop, typed something, studied the screen with the detached interest of someone reviewing a grocery list. Coffee waited, sweating, terrified. Finally, Matteo looked up. "Do you know why you're still alive?" he asked conversationally. Coffee's throat closed. He managed to shake his head. "Because killing you would upset my sister," Matteo said simply. "Juliet has spent 6 years trying to build a life that doesn't involve violence. She ran from my world specifically to avoid this." He gestured vaguely at the office, at himself, at the situation, "and I'd prefer not to prove her right about what I am by executing her abusive boyfriend in the first hour of our reunion." He paused. "So you get to live. Congratulations." The word should have been a relief. Instead, it landed like a threat. "Thank you," Coffee whispered. "Don't thank me yet." Matteo turned the laptop around. The screen showed a document-dense legal text, multiple pages. "This is a contract. You're going to sign it. Do you know what it says?" Coffee stared at the words. They blurred together. "No. It says you're transferring all rights to the apartment to Juliet. It says you're relinquishing any claim on the joint bank account. It says you're agreeing to a restraining order that covers not just Geneva, but all of Switzerland, France, and Italy. It says if you're ever found within 500 meters of my sister, all bets are off." Matteo scrolled down. "It also says you're waiving any right to legal action against me, my associates, or anyone connected to this evening. You're acknowledging that you left of your own free will, that no crime was committed, that you have no complaints and no grounds for police involvement. And if I don't sign?" Matteo smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Then we have a different conversation, one that involves the evidence I have of your theft, your assault, your previous restraining order in London that you violated twice before the woman fled the country. One that involves phone calls to your employer, your family, the police. One that involves making sure everyone you know understands exactly what kind of man you are. He leaned forward. I can destroy you legally, Coffee. Completely. Publicly. Make sure you never work again, never rent an apartment again, never date again without the woman Googling your name and finding pages of documented abuse. I can do all of that without ever touching you. The words hung in the air. Or, Mateo continued, you can sign. Take the money I'm offering enough for 6 months of living expenses somewhere far from here. Disappear quietly. Start over. Learn from this. Coffee's hands trembled as he reached for the pen sitting on the desk. Where do I sign? 20 minutes later, every page was initialed, every clause agreed to, every bridge burned. Mateo slid an envelope across the desk. 10,000 euros. Cash. Non-negotiable. Don't come back for more. Coffee took it with shaking hands. There's a train to Milan in 2 hours, Mateo said. My men will drive you to the station. You'll get on that train. You'll never contact Juliet again. You'll never speak her name. You'll never tell this story. Do you understand? Yes. Do you understand what happens if you break this agreement? Coffee nodded. He understood perfectly. Mateo stood, buttoned his sleeves with precise economical movements. You made a choice tonight, Coffee. You chose to put your hands on someone you thought was powerless. Someone you thought had no protection. Someone you thought you could hurt without consequences. He walked around the desk, stopped in front of Coffee's chair. You were wrong about all three. Juliet isn't powerless. She was never unprotected, and there are always consequences. Mateo's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. The only reason you're walking out of here is because my sister asked me to stop. Not because you deserve mercy. Not because you've earned forgiveness. But because she whispered my name and I remembered that she ran from this life to avoid exactly this kind of violence. He straightened. So I'm giving you what she wanted. A clean exit. No blood, no body. Just absence. Coffee stood on shaking legs. The envelope felt heavy in his hands. But if you ever come near her again... Mateo continued. I will forget what she wanted. I will remember only what you did. And the next conversation we have will not end with train tickets and cash. Do you understand? Yes. Say it. I understand. Coffee's voice broke. I'll never contact her. Never come back. I swear. Mateo studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Good. He pressed a button on his desk. The door opened. The 2 men reappeared. Take him to Gare Cornavin, Mateo said. Make sure he gets on the Milan train. After that, he's not our problem. The older man nodded. Understood. They flanked Coffee, guided him toward the door. At the threshold, Coffee stopped, turned back. For what it's worth, he said quietly. I did love her. At the beginning. Mateo's expression didn't change. Love doesn't put hands on people, he said. What you felt was ownership. And ownership isn't love, it's just control with better marketing. Coffee had no response to that. He left. The door closed. And Mateo stood alone in his office, looking out at the city lights, thinking about his sister crying in an apartment 40 minutes away, thinking about the 6 years she'd spent running, thinking about the promise he'd made to himself when she was 9 years old and hiding behind his office door. He'd failed her then by letting her see what he was. He'd failed her again by giving her the distance she asked for. He wouldn't fail her a third time. Whatever it took, whatever it cost. No one would hurt Juliet Lambert again. Juliet didn't know how long she cried. Time had stopped meaning anything the moment Mateo walked through the door. Minutes. Hours. It all blurred together into one endless present tense, where the only reality was her brother's arms around her and the slow, careful way he held her, like she might shatter completely if he let go. Eventually, the tears stopped. Not because the pain had ended. Just because her body had run out of ways to express it. She pulled back slowly. Mateo let her go immediately, no clinging, no forcing comfort she wasn't ready for. Just gave her space and waited. Juliet looked around the apartment. It looked the same. Same furniture, same curtains, same broken glass scattered across the floor from where Coffee had punched through the mirror last week. But everything felt different. The air felt different. The silence felt different. She felt different. He's gone? Her voice came out rough, raw from crying. Yes. Where? Milan. Then wherever he decides to run after that. Mateo stood, moved to the kitchen, returned with a glass of water, set it on the coffee table within her reach. He signed papers. Transferred the apartment to you. Agreed to a restraining order covering 3 countries. Took money and a train ticket and a very clear understanding of what happens if he comes back. Juliet picked up the water. Her hands shook slightly. You didn't hurt him. It wasn't a question. But Matteo answered anyway. No, because I asked you not to. Yes. She took a sip. The water was cold, clean, exactly what she needed but couldn't have asked for. Thank you, she said quietly. Matteo sat in the chair across from her. Not on the couch, that would have been too close. He was giving her space. Room to breathe. Permission to process. It was such a small thing. It shouldn't have meant as much as it did. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner, Matteo said. I was monitoring, watching from a distance. I thought distance was what you wanted. It was. Juliet set the glass down. It is. I don't know. You ran from my world. I ran from violence, she corrected. From blood and guns and men disappearing in the night. I ran from watching you become someone I didn't recognize. Matteo's jaw tightened. And you ended up with violence anyway. Different violence. Violence is violence, Juliet. No. She looked at him directly now. Your violence comes from power. From control. From building empires and protecting territory. Coffee's violence came from weakness. From insecurity. From hating himself so much he needed to make me smaller to feel bigger. She paused. They're not the same thing. Matteo considered that. They both hurt you. Yes. But only one of them I chose to run from. The words landed between them like stones. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Matteo leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. What do you want, Juliet? Not what you think I want to hear. Not what you think you should want. What do you actually want? It was such a simple question. It destroyed her. Because Juliet had spent 6 years knowing exactly what she wanted. Freedom, anonymity, normalcy, safety. And she'd achieved 3 out of 4. Built a quiet life in a quiet city, with a quiet job and quiet routines. And it hadn't protected her. I don't know, she admitted. I thought I knew. I thought if I just stayed invisible enough, careful enough, small enough, I could avoid this. Avoid you. Avoid everything that comes with the Lambert name. You did avoid me. And look where it got me. Her laugh was bitter. On my knees in my own apartment with a man's hand in my hair while my brother walked in like some kind of avenging angel. I'm not an angel. I know what you are, Matteo. Juliet's voice hardened. I've always known. I grew up watching, learning, understanding exactly what it means to be a Lambert. That's why I ran. And now? Now I'm tired. The confession came out quiet. Defeated. I'm tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of pretending I can build something normal, when normal keeps turning into nightmares anyway. She looked at him. I'm tired of being afraid. Matteo's expression didn't change. But something shifted in his eyes. Some recognition. Some understanding that ran deeper than words. You don't have to be afraid anymore, he said. Because you'll protect me. Yes. By making people disappear, if necessary. Juliet wrapped her arms around herself. That's not freedom, Matteo. That's just a different kind of cage. Maybe. He didn't argue. Didn't try to convince her otherwise. But it's a cage where no one hurts you. Where no one dares. Where your name alone is enough to keep you safe. My name, Juliet repeated. Lambert. The name I spent 6 years burying. It was always yours. You just tried to forget. I tried to escape. Did it work? The question hung in the air. Juliet thought about the apartment. The job. The careful routines. The friendship with Claire that she'd abandoned the moment coffee demanded it. The life she'd built that had crumbled the moment someone decided to test its foundations. No, she admitted finally. It didn't work. Matteo nodded. Like he'd known all along what her answer would be. I'm not asking you to come back to my world, he said carefully. I'm not asking you to work for me. Stand beside me at meetings. Become part of the empire. You made your choice 6 years ago, and I respect it. But I'm not letting you face the world alone anymore. His voice was firm. Final. You can keep this apartment, keep your job, keep whatever life you want to build, but you do it with protection, with resources, with the knowledge that anyone who touches you answers to me. That's still control. It's insurance. It's the same thing my father used to say. Matteo flinched, just slightly, just enough for Juliet to notice. Our father, he said quietly, built an empire by making people afraid. I maintain it by making people smart. There's a difference. Is there? Asked Coffee. He's alive, leaving the country with money and a future. Our father would have buried him in a vineyard. Juliet couldn't argue with that. She'd seen what their father was capable of. Seen the bodies, heard the screams, witnessed the casual brutality that came from a man who believed mercy was weakness. Mateo was many things, but he wasn't their father. What if I say no? She asked. What if I tell you to leave, to go back to Marseille and forget you ever found me? Mateo met her eyes. Then I leave, and I go back to watching from a distance. And I pray that next time something happens, I see the warning signs faster. There won't be a next time. You can't promise that. Neither can you. No, Mateo agreed, but I can make it significantly less likely. Juliet looked at her brother, at the man who'd read her bedtime stories and built an empire and walked through her door at exactly the right moment to save her from something she couldn't save herself from. She thought about 6 years of running, 6 months of surviving, 6 minutes of watching everything collide. And she made a choice, not the choice she'd made at 18. Not the choice fear demanded, the choice truth required. Okay, she said quietly. Mateo raised an eyebrow. Okay? Okay. I'll accept protection, resources, whatever keeps me safe. But I keep my life, my apartment, my independence. I'm not becoming part of your world, I'm just acknowledging it exists. That's all I'm asking. And Mateo? Yes? If you ever lie to me about what you're doing to protect me, if you ever make me complicit in violence I don't want to know about, I'll run again. And next time, you won't find me. He considered that, then nodded once. Fair. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't healing, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings were enough. Mateo stayed until sunrise. Not hovering, not interrogating, just present. He cleaned up the broken glass while Juliet sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. He didn't ask if she needed help, didn't wait for permission, just moved through the apartment with quiet efficiency, erasing the physical evidence of what had happened while the emotional evidence continued bleeding. At some point, Juliet dozed. Not sleep, not really. Just exhaustion dragging her under for minutes at a time before some noise or memory jerked her back to consciousness. When she opened her eyes fully, the apartment was clean. The glass gone, the furniture straightened, the broken mirror covered with a sheet, temporarily hidden until it could be properly replaced. Mateo sat in the chair across from her, jacket back on, looking like he hadn't just spent the night cleaning up the wreckage of his sister's life. What time is it? Juliet's voice was hoarse. 6:30. Dawn light filtered through the curtains. Soft, gray, the kind of light that made everything look temporary. You should go, Juliet said. You have an empire to run. The empire can wait. Mateo, I'm not leaving until we talk about what happens next. Juliet pulled the blanket tighter. I thought we already did that. We talked about protection, not about healing. The word landed heavy. Juliet had been avoiding it, avoiding thinking about what came after survival, what came after Coffee was gone and Mateo was here and she was left with 6 months of trauma and no clear path forward. I don't know how to heal from this, she admitted. Neither do I. Mateo's honesty surprised her. I know how to eliminate threats, how to protect assets, how to make problems disappear. But helping you actually recover from what he did? I have no idea where to start. Then why are you still here? Because you're my sister. And I don't need to know how to fix this to know I'm not leaving you alone in it. Juliet felt tears prick her eyes again. She was so tired of crying, tired of being weak, tired of needing people. I need help, she whispered. Professional help. Therapy. Something. I'll arrange it. Not one of your people. Someone independent. Someone who has nothing to do with your world. Mateo nodded. I know someone. A doctor in Zurich. Works with trauma survivors. Completely civilian. She's helped people before, people who've left violent situations. I'll make the introduction if you want. You know a trauma therapist. I know lots of people, Juliet. Not all of them are criminals. Despite everything, Juliet almost smiled. Okay. Yes. Please. Done. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. Just heavy with things they didn't know how to say. Finally, Mateo stood. I have to go back to Marseille tonight. But I'm leaving 2 people here. Security. They'll be subtle, you won't see them unless you need to. But they'll be close. I don't want bodyguards. They're not negotiable. His tone allowed no argument. After what happened, I'm not taking chances. Give it a month. If you still hate it, we'll revisit. Juliet wanted to argue, wanted to insist she didn't need babysitters. But the truth was, She was terrified. Terrified Coffee would come back. Terrified someone worse would find her. Terrified that being alone meant being vulnerable. 1 month, she agreed. 1 month. Mateo moved toward the door. Stopped. Turned back. Juliet? Yeah? What you said earlier. About running from violence, not from me. I remember. I need you to know something. He paused, choosing words carefully. I became what I am because I thought power was protection. I thought if I controlled enough, built enough, made people afraid enough, nothing could hurt the people I loved. His jaw tightened. But I was wrong. Control doesn't protect people. It just gives you the illusion that you can. And in the process of building that illusion, I became exactly what you needed to run from. Juliet stood slowly. The blanket slipped from her shoulders. You also became the person who saved me tonight. Because I was watching. Because I never really let you go. I know. Does that make you angry? Juliet thought about it. Really thought about it. 6 years ago, the answer would have been yes. The surveillance, the monitoring, the inability to truly disappear, all of it would have felt like violation. Now she understood that love and letting go were sometimes incompatible. No, she said finally. It makes me grateful, and sad, and confused, but not angry. Mateo nodded. He understood complicated emotions. His entire life was built on them. I'm going to make you a promise, he said. And I need you to believe me. Okay, no one will ever hurt you again. His voice was quiet. Absolute. Not like this. Not while I'm alive. I don't care who they are, what they want, or what excuses they have. Anyone who puts their hands on you, anyone who makes you afraid, anyone who thinks you're powerless, they'll learn exactly how wrong they are. Juliet's throat tightened. That's a dangerous promise, Mateo. I'm a dangerous man. I know. And you're still my sister. Still the girl who used to hide behind my office door. Still the only person in the world I'd burn everything down to protect. He moved closer. Stopped an arm's length away. I know what I am, Juliet. I know the things I've done, the people I've hurt, the lines I've crossed. But everything, all of it, was about keeping the people I love safe. And I failed you. I let you run because I thought distance would protect you better than proximity. I was wrong. You weren't wrong, Juliet said. I needed to run. I needed to try. I needed to know I could survive without your shadow over everything. And now? Now I know I can survive. But I also know I don't have to survive alone. Mateo smiled. Small. Genuine. No, he agreed. You don't. He pulled a card from his pocket. Set it on the table. My direct number. Not the business line. Not the one that goes through assistants. Just me. You call that number. Anytime, any reason, and I answer. Juliet picked up the card. Plain. White. Just numbers. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We haven't figured out how to be siblings again after 6 years apart. That's going to be messy. Probably. But we'll figure it out. Yeah. Mateo moved to the door. Put his hand on the knob. Stopped one more time. I love you, Juliet. I don't say it enough. Don't know how to show it without making it about control. But I do. Love you. Juliet's voice cracked. I love you too. And then he was gone. The door closed softly. The apartment fell silent. And Juliet Lambert stood in the morning light, wrapped in a blanket, holding her brother's phone number, and finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could heal. Not alone, not in hiding, but with the protection she'd spent 6 years running from, and the love she'd never actually lost. Blood remembered blood, and sometimes that was mercy. Thanks for sticking with this story until the very end. You're the reason these stories feel alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to read your thoughts and connect with you in the comments.